For more on this, I'm joined from Los Angeles by Jonathan Wachtel, Global Affairs Analyst and former US diplomat to the United Nations. An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. So, as I just said there, Israel says the famine report is biased and it's based on Hamas. Has the UN-backed IPC report classified the famine fairly?
Look, I'm not an expert on famine. I certainly have borne witness to famines, as both a diplomat and as a journalist, actually covering the atrocities in Darfur and other parts of the world in the former Yugoslavia, in the war there and things like that. I've been to Gaza, worked in Gaza, understand the difficulties of the situation down there, understand that there's a war going on, and frankly speaking, we all know, as certainly me as a former journalist, that one of the first victims of a war is the truth. So it's difficult to say where it is here. What is clear is that there is suffering going on in Gaza. That suffering continues as long as the Israeli hostages are held and as long as the IDF continues operations against Hamas in the very heavily populated Gaza Strip, which is also at the same time inflicting such horrible situations on the civilian population there. So really what needs to happen is there needs to be international pressure brought to bear largely at this point, something that happened from the Arab League recently, in which it's the message is Hamas, let the hostages go, step out of the way, and let there be a Palestinian leadership that's going to come in, that's going to be working toward an accommodation of Israel and the needs of the Palestinian people, as opposed to this endless conflict that's been the result of a militant group holding sway within the Gaza Strip with a set mission to destroy its neighbor, and went about trying to do that on October 7th. And we have been in this horror show. The suffering needs to stop, and the best and quickest path to that is to try to get this political resolution worked out, because whatever's done, and certainly the aid needs to go in, whatever's done, there has to be an actual fix to this. And the status quo just does not work.
And it's really interesting, you say there has to be a fix to this, but the fix seems pretty difficult to find. And we heard from the UN official, Tom Fletcher, and he says this is a famine openly promoted by some Israeli leaders as a weapon of war. Do Israel's actions amount to a war crime in this instance? And you said to me, you've seen famines before, you've been on the ground in Gaza. What does this mean? Is this a war crime?
This is certainly a horrendous situation. I'm not, an expert in terms of war crimes. I don't have that legal background. I do know that obviously horrible things have been taking place. Obviously, children, innocent people should not be suffering from hunger, should have access to food and the ability to live normal lives. That is not happening. It's not happening. First and foremost, because there was this horrendous attack on October 7th, thousands of rockets shelled on, landing on Israeli population centers, and the mass murder, rape, and abduction of Israeli citizens, which certainly created an environment within Israel that is not a love affair of their neighbors, certainly. And, in the midst of this conflict, Israel is actually getting aid in, something which, frankly speaking, in conflict zones, when you have warring parties, doesn't really happen much at all. So it's not enough aid getting in, certainly needs to be more aid getting in. The United Nations, frankly speaking, has been actually central to the problem in many ways, of turning a blind eye to what was happening with all the tunnels and the militant activity in Gaza, and outsourcing, essentially, taking over the humanitarian and education systems of Gaza, as opposed to having a government there that is actually responsible to its people and working toward a situation in which there can be peace with its neighbor. Israel's not going anywhere. The Hamas quest, which is an Islamist Islamist quest, something that frightens the living bejeebies out of Egypt and many other Arab countries that don't want to see that level of fundamentalism happening. They're in power there. Whether we like it or not, that's the truth. That's the true impediment here.
Jonathan,
what needs to happen?
I can hear everything that you are saying to me, and with regards to the October 7th attack and Hamas. And a lot of people think that things might have become a little bit disproportionate at the moment, and the international tide is turning against Israel. The October the 7th attack was absolutely horrendous, and the whole world condemned it. But we're now seeing 62,000 people dead inside of Gaza and a famine being declared. Do you not think that the world needs to speak out? And really, has President Trump done enough? Because in the past, he said occupying Gaza is pretty much up to Benjamin Netanyahu. And he's also said Netanyahu was a war hero. So right now, what's the answer? And is the US doing enough? Or are they giving carte blanche to Israel?
Really, this is an issue that affects the neighborhood first and foremost. So what needs to happen, Leanne, is truly the death toll and the suffering that's happening in Gaza, which is, we don't know even where the truth lies in that. The numbers are astounding in terms of children dying and women and innocents of those 62,000 people you talk about. Certainly a large number are Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but we don't know because the Ministry of Health is run by Hamas, and they, they're the ones delivering the figures, and they do not differentiate between civilians and combatant and militants. They just don't. So it's very questionable. What is the case, and not disputing that whatsoever, is that the situation in Gaza is absolutely unacceptable, and there needs to be relief coming in, and we need to resolve this crisis. Now, the Arab League the other day asked Hamas to put down their arms and allow a political settlement of the situation and to release the hostages. If the hostages had been released months and months ago, actually well over a year ago, we wouldn't be where we are. This would not be happening. And the problem is that we're stuck in a situation in which Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition, which is very fragile, has a couple of figures in it who are really ultra-nationalists and difficult, and holding him accountable to not cave in. And it's a political quagmire. In a situation like this, a lot of power is in the hands of the Egyptians, the Qataris, and other Arab countries, the UAE included, of trying to figure out a way to intervene in a way in which the Arab street doesn't perceive this as capitulating to Israeli wants and wishes, but really wants and wishes of the Palestinian people, who do not deserve leadership of what Hamas represents. They are not responsible. What they've done is essentially subjected the Palestinian people to misery for now a couple of decades, and it needs to end. And they need to step out of the way. And that support really does need to come from the region. It needs to come from very courageous Arab leaders who will step in and say, look, this is just not good. Our brothers and sisters in Gaza and the West Bank can't continue in this way. Certainly in Gaza, it can't continue. That's where the energy needs to come from. We need that bravery. I think of Anwar Sadat, and the poor guy, paid with his life. But what he managed to achieve in terms of peace and moving the region forward is just unbelievably important. And, we need that type of leadership, that type of bravery, that type of commitment to help the Palestinian people. And we're not talking about the Israelis. The Palestinian people need responsible leadership.
Jonathan Wachtel, I'm so sorry, Jonathan. I do apologize, but sadly we are out of time. But it was brilliant to have your insights and your time this evening. Thank you so much for joining the show.